everybody, and welcome to this third and final part in my 3-part series on the Magic Triangle that's happening from 2025 to 2028 with its peak dates in 2026, 2027 and 2028. Check out episodes 1 and 2 where I lay down the foundations, the timelines in episode 1. In episode 2, I lay down, guidance for all 12 sun, moon and rising signs. Also talk through the chakras and Sabian symbols in more depth. And in this third and final part, I'm going to actually give you practical tips on how to use this energy over the next 3 years. As I said, so just looking at how you can use this in your day-to-day life to look after your health and mind, body and soul. Also talk about how it impacts your relationships as well, giving you a final timeline of the peak events, how you can, do practical, actions to increase your material freedom, looking after your finances, how to, get more involved with your spiritual practice, how to let go of things, how to become more self-empowered, set boundaries and allow other people to be empowered as well, how it's going to affect the collective, how to live the changes that the Magic Triangle is calling you to have over the next 3 years. Go into a bit more depth on how you can practically use the Sabian symbol and activate this energy and all that good stuff. So in part 2, as I said, I talked about the Sabian symbols that activated across the 4-year period with the opening symbols of Uranus, Pluto and Neptune in the 6 degrees of their respective signs, Pisces, Capricorn and Taurus as well, with the peak at the 11th degrees of their Sabian symbols as well. So we had the opening symbols of the 6th degree, which was a bridge under construction, officers in ceremonial dress, right? So through to the first peak of the symbols at 11 degrees, which had the Sabian symbology, a woman tending to looking after newly risen flowers, seekers on a narrow path and a large group of pheasants. And then talked about the retrograde symbols, the 8th to the 10th degree, that's had the Sabian symbology, a sleigh without snow, a girl blowing a bugle and the albatross trusting a sailor's hand. And then the integration of all these symbols at the 13 degrees, which had the Sabian symbology of a porter carrying baggage, an ancient sword in a museum and a fire worshipper meditating. And finally, the completion signals, which were the 15th degrees of Capricorn, Pluto and Uranus, that had the Sabian symbology of the man with the rakish silk hat, braving a storm, a child's ward filled with toys, an officer training men under 5, and each symbol, represents different aspects, symbology and psychologically, and I gave you guidance on the shadow of these aspects and the gift of them. And I also talked about the chakras, which we had the key ones were Kitikra, Chakra, Uttra Baddhapada Chakra, Savana and Rahini as well. So I went into, how this was going to, affect you in terms of, the chakras. So now I'm going to talk about the development areas anyway. So, the specific developmental abilities, capabilities the triangle is activating for the collective across 2025 to 2028 are not personal goals when we look at it from globally, but collective edges, the places where the era itself is asking humanity to grow. And of course, I gave rising sign guidelines, so we've all got different areas of our life that we will be called to grow on depending on our sun, moon and rising signs and the aspects in our natal charts, as well as the transits, right? So we encounter the changes in different dimensions of our own life, and they're being worked into the entire collective field at the same time too. So as I said, how can we translate that vision into our material, our practical day-to-day life routines without killing either the vision or our practical day-to-day routines? As I said, a lot of spiritual practices over the past maybe 50 years, peaking in the late 2010s and early 2020s have been calling us to escape, using spirituality to escape our practical reality, right? And the Uranus-Neptune sextile, which has 4 exact passes from August 2025 to June 2027, asks us to develop the ability to move a genuine spiritual vision into practical reality without either corrupting the vision, corrupting the higher ideals. We all think about equal rights and justice, but then if you've got enough money, you can get yourself off a murder charge. It depends on which country, which city, town or state you're in. Also colour of people's skins and education levels, on whether they're accepted by society, if they get away with certain things, So this is asking us to take those higher ideals for equal educational access to all people, healthcare, spirituality or religion, whatever it is, without corrupting the vision, without putting culture into religion. We have made our gods human-like, vengeful and stuff. And if we believe in a God, it's a higher power, higher than us, so it doesn't, a God, a spiritual being, doesn't act in the way that we would react and, take things personally and want an eye for an eye, judging people on their past. It would realise that everyone has a past and we all do things wrong, and we don't say, well, your wrongs are worse than mine, so I'm going to judge you, sort of thing. So to ground a higher ideal spiritual vision into practical reality material form without corrupting the vision through compromise or killing the material needs of paying bills, looking after your health, your body's needs and your mind's needs through impractical spirituality. So most people operate in one of the 2 failure modes. This sextile is designed to bridge first, as I said earlier, the visionary, the spiritual person who never lands, the mystic whose practice is real whilst knowing is genuine, and whose material life, practical life, remains organised around the value system directly contradicted by what the practice reveals. The second, the innovator who never transcends, who goes beyond, right? The builder whose material creativity is genuine and sophisticated, and whose relationship to meaning, purpose and the larger question of what is all for, what's all this building and accumulating money or for, remains entirely unexamined, right? So, we either get lost in the spiritual or get lost in the practical things, ignoring the spiritual, and we're being called as a collective to find that balance on the collective level, starting with the individual changes, right? So this sextile is building, allowing us to find that balance, right? The third ability, not a compromise between them, an integration that preserves the material and the spiritual without, watering down, diluting either. What the mystic sees needs to reorganize how the builder builds. What the builder builds needs to be worthy of what the mystic sees, right? So the 4 exact passes of Uranus-Neptune sextile operate at different Sabian degrees, each one offering a slightly different lesson in the same core skill. So in August 2025, with Taurus and Pisces at the 6 degrees of their sign, the bridge under construction and the parade of officers, we was, told to see the gap between vision and, the material life is real, seeing that there is a gap there and how can we fix it. And we may have started, if you look back to August 25, did you start changing? What did you start changing in your life, and looking at the performance of spiritual identity that needs to become an actual lived in deployment in your practical actions in what you say and do, right? So as we go into July 2026, the peak of this energy, when Uranus in Taurus is in the 11th degree, right, and Neptune in Pisces is in the 11th degree with the Sabian symbol, the woman looking after, tending to new growth, and the seekers on a narrow path. The vision has produced something real in material form, so we have to start looking at how we can make our visions more practical and live in our day-to-day life, and choosing appropriate actions, right, and choosing your specific practice and way of life and walking it right. And as we go into January 2027, And we have Uranus and Pisces at the 8 degrees, and that's the Sabian symbology of the sleigh on uncovered land and the girl blowing the bugle, right? So check in whether the tools that you use, the relationships you have, your sleep habits, what you eat, what you're doing, match the conditions of your life. Sound what you know, say what you know, even though it may be through an unexpected instrument, right? The words may come out through art, or, you may write a book, start a podcast, whatever. It's wanting you to speak your mind. Yes, there may be consequences, but as I said earlier, it's about each 12 sun, moon and rising signs asking themselves fundamentally who they want to be and be in it. So as we go into June 2027, when we have Taurus and Pisces at the 13th degrees, it has the Sabian symbology, the porter carrying baggage, and the ancient sold in the museum. You can ask yourself, what are you carrying on from this energy? What is ready to be honoured, and what's ready to be, compost, set down, let go of, right? And the development mechanism is the weekly translation, as I said, trying to work with one specific spiritual insight and convert that into one specific practical change, not the general principle, but the particular actions of practicing what you preach, walking what you believe in, not just saying I believe in interconnection, we're all one, regardless of our gender, religion, sexuality and all of that. You will say something like, this week I looked at this specific thing from a neighborhood instead of a corporation. So, on the basic level, maybe going to a local business and buying from there, getting to know a neighbor, taking a walk around your neighborhood, getting connected with your environment, and the body will register this developmental edge. Maybe you'll feel it in your chest, right? Your heart can open towards the vision and grow genuinely. You can feel genuinely recognized, the felt sense that this is true because you've done the practical action, not just say, I believe we're all connected, but take an action to live that in your life, speak with someone who's not like you, stuff like that. So the solar plexus at the same time contracts at the prospect of acting on materially, so looking after your chakras, being in tune with your body knowing that you are living what you say, you know what you talk, and this will have consequences, and that split is the precise location of the set styles development work. The practice is staying present to both sensations and at the same time, without collapsing either, not choosing the heart and abandoning the solar plexus, that spiritual bypassing, not choosing the solar plexus and closing the heart, that's material pragmatism, holding the fullness of both until the integration becomes possible and the action from both sources, comes up at the same time. So when you've done this, directly, practice what you preach. Yes, I believe in we're all one, and then do an action to so that you do that. Like I said, talk to someone out of your comfort zone, someone who doesn't think the same way you do. We're all in our little algorithm bubbles, as I said earlier. So when the vision has landed, when we practice what we preach, without the spiritual or the material, the practical being sacrificed, the body will signal like a different sort of like settling, both the chest and the belly, or other part of your body, not just the chest and your belly, but you will feel it in your belly. You will have the same quality of aliveness and balance, in all areas of your body, or just feel more settled within yourself. And that landing sensation is distinct from both the floating of pure vision and the contraction of pure material anxiety. So choose one vision that has been floating in your head, what you've been thinking about doing, one thing spiritually to be true, but haven't yet acted on materially, practically. Give yourself 1 week to find the smallest possible material expression of that vision, or some of you may need 2 weeks or a month or whatever, but just take some time out to live, that belief, and, instead of just saying that belief, So even if it's tiny, right? It's about, planting that seed of action. It doesn't have to be in the final form. You just have to start, right? Plant that seed, check what happens through the vision. Once it has a practical anchor, you carry it out. Notice whether the vision becomes more or less real once it takes a physical form, right? So the second thing in terms of our development, this magic triangle is asking us is to tell the difference from your knowing, from our own personal self-expression, and the collective's knowing, right? So number 2, the second developmental area is telling the difference, distinguishing your knowing from the collective's knowing. So Neptune at the apex, the peak of this, the midpoint of this triangle between Uranus and Pluto, right, means the collective spiritual energy field is at maximum peak for 4 years, right? So visions, ideologies, spiritual processes and frameworks, collective narratives, stories, these are going to be more available. And as we see, we've got a lot of people saying some things on one side, another side, and the narratives are getting more persuasive and more divisive at the moment as well, and more contagious than in ordinary times. We're having a lot of fighting across religions, infighting children. It's getting younger, the people that are doing these terrorist acts and getting sucked in by these ideologies, right? So this is both a developmental challenge and a gift. I want to talk about the gift in a bit. So the ability that's being developed over this time, even though it all seems a bit crap, is our ability to judge, to discern within the collective vision, right? Not skepticism, not saying, oh, that's rubbish, but how to use our judgment. As I said, if we live in our algorithm bubbles, we can just believe whatever we take in, but we have to always, use critical thinking, see the other side. And the one gauge that you can always tell if something's making you feel uncomfortable because it's outside of your comfort zone, and you may want to switch it off and not listen to it. As we go deeper into adulthood, we may not agree with what other people say, but we have to listen and at least, challenge it in a sort of like, I don't want to say a diplomatic way, because sometimes we have to get a bit heated and stuff, but in a way that we can understand that the other person or the group have different life experiences, cultures and perspectives, and that doesn't mean that ours is wrong or theirs wrong as well. You just have to try and meet in the middle, right? So it wants us to tell the difference between what you genuinely know from your own embodied, lived-in experience of being alive, and what you've absorbed from the collective field and mistaken it for knowledge because it arrived with the feeling of evolution. And this is harder than it sounds, because it really is. There's so much information in the age of information, so much people are saying, so much can seem real. How do we tell the difference between fact and fiction? And Neptune in Pisces, dissolves the membrane between individual and the collective consciousness, and the collective's visions becomes available to us as if they were our own, right? The activation is real. The feeling, the knowing feels genuine. The work is learning to test it. So, real knowing, and going back to the Sakra and the deity Ea Bandada, the serpent wisdom at the floor of the ocean, has a specific quality. It's quiet, it persists. It don't say, you have to believe me, the other side is wrong. And we're seeing that a lot in our politics, right? It doesn't require an active fate state, doesn't require you to get angry over different people, different cultures, religions, or anything like that, right? It doesn't need to get your heat up and in a state of fear or anger to remain true. It survives when the collective that produced it, disperses, right? They go onto the net. Sometimes, these people come in online with agendas, or government say things, gets us riled up. We vote in a change and nothing really changes, so we have to get smarter. And it's the same tactic at what people use, divide and conquer, right? So the truth, is available in an ordinary Tuesday morning when no one is watching and nothing is being performed. So that's how you can tell the truth, right? a collective vision is absorbed without digestion has a different signature. Like if we look at a lot of arguments in our world now, we're all heat up about things that, did you really care about these things before you was told to care about them? And this doesn't mean don't care about injustice and all the rest of it, inequality, but a lot of the times it's smokes and mirrors. It's blaming one group of people to deflect from the true source of whatever's draining the collective economy. In most parts, what's draining the collective economy more than anything sort of a welfare system or people coming from other countries is like people in government not spending, misappropriating funds, and companies and corporations finding loopholes not to pay their taxes and stuff. That's the biggest killer of, a nation's GDP or profits and stuff like that. It's not people coming in. Sometimes people from other countries are doing the jobs that the natives of that country don't want to do and stuff like, so we have to get real on what we are absorbing and what is actually truth. So, real truth is different from a collectivism that's absorbed without digestion and has a different signature that arrives with urgency. It feels more true in the presence of others who share it than when you're alone and you question it, right? When you're all there, group, we have a lot of demonstrations and stuff going on, it can seem true. When you're alone, think, does this still hold water, right? And, collective truth requires maintenance, feeding it with more content, more community, more activation to remain convincing. It tends to, demand that doubt be suppressed rather than engage in doubt as a legitimate part of the judgment process. It says no, this is the only truth. All the other sides, what everyone else is saying, is a lie. You don't doubt it. If you doubt, you're not a true believer, sort of thing, right? And this triangle, this aspect of the triangle, is developing the ability to sit with knowing across the gap between activated states, right? To take the vision that arrived in ceremony or retreat or peak experience, demonstrations, and carry it into the ordinary weekly day-to-day life without supporting, the collective and seeing what remains without, the collective energy field is genuinely yours, and what fades without the field, was borrowed. The body signals this development edge in two distinct ways. The body signal for genuine depth and knowing is quiet, persistent, and available in stillness, localized somewhere in the torso, often solar plexus, sometimes heart, sometimes a knowing in the gut that doesn't require any particular emotional state to access, like anger, fear, and judgment, It's there on the boring days, it doesn't perform. The body signal for collective vision adopted without digestion, without true meaning, just getting caught up in the protests and the collective just wanting to be on trend, right? It has a high voltage quality, activation, aliveness, the feeling of being chosen or awakened. It requires the persistence of other activated people to feel most real. It tends to be located in the head or the throat rather than the deeper torso. It produces urgency, discrimination, and neither body signal is automatically right or wrong. Genuine knowing can survive with excitement, and it doesn't have to be boring, and collective vision can be true, but the judgment isn't about dismissing the high voltage activation. It's about testing it against the quiet knowing, against truth. Don't all people of all nations deserve the same freedoms? Yes, I know that, you may argue that those, like murderers and criminals may not deserve certain things, and that's true. They have to be kept away from society. But are the conditions that they are being kept in while they are imprisoned, right? A lot of the time people go to prison and learn to be better criminals, right? So it's about testing that high voltage activation against the quiet knowing to see if they point in the same direction when the assignment settles. And within any framework, ideology, vision, process, spiritual teaching that feels urgent and true, take it to solitude before acting on it. Think about it when you're on your own, outside of the group, no social media, no going on, protest, just sit with it on your own. And if that doubt comes up, and then do your own research, right, rather than just be led, so give, for instance, any ideology a week of ordinary life, and sometimes it's about finding about what ordinary is, because a lot of us live in hyper-vigilant, highly activated states, getting our dopamine hits of scrolling and constant social media and all of that, right? So, not a retreat, not social media, not a workshop, not an intensive sort of like protest, a normal week where you maybe don't scroll on social media, just get on with your day-to-day life, cleaning the house, going to work, looking after any kids you have or anyone you have, doing normal things, maybe reading a book instead of scrolling online, just an ordinary week of actual existence. If after that week or 2 or 3 for some of us, right, or maybe a month or 3 months, right, in the unglamorous conditions of the normal, Tuesday morning, if the knowing still feels as true as it did at the activated moment when you're scrolling all the time, engaging and consuming all the biased algorithmic data, maybe it's not always biased, but is it biased? Question it, right? And if it has a stronger claim on being genuinely yours when you're alone, and you say, yeah, this is my actual beliefs, then yeah, go for it, right? But if the urgency fades quite a bit without the activating field, without the constant, taking in the certain, information, investigate the source before acting on the information, not to dismiss it, but to understand what you're actually dealing with. The magic triangle wants you to ask yourself, are your actual beliefs and way of lives yours, or just a way of life you've been told to live from external messages, right? So the third arc is the arc of long commitment and revolutionary patience, right? Can we commit over a long period of time, often not seeing any immediate results? Can you do that? So the Uranus-Pluto trine runs through 5 exact passes from July 2026 to May 2028. So that's 22 months of sustained long-term material innovation and change in natural flow with structural transformation. This is not a sprint, right? Not a breakthrough moment followed by integration. This is a multi-year arc of long-term sustained engagement with a consistent direction of change. So the developmental ability this is asking for is one, that most people who are genuinely awake to the need for transformation chronically underestimate, right, the ability to remain in committed motion, stick to our goals, not procrastinate, right, across time without requiring constant confirmation that the motion is working. So the failure pattern is consistent, right? The revolutionary is energized by breakthrough moments, the lightning bolt of Uranus, the dramatic meeting of all the magic triangle, Uranus, Neptune and Pluto in July 2026, the peak activation periods, the peak sensations of maybe going out with your mates, getting a high, maybe overindulging in alcohol, drugs, going on that protest, scrolling through that social media, getting your fix right, getting that peak activation, right? And then there's a gap between the highs. Every high has a low, right? A gap between the lightning bolts and the unsets, the Tuesday of building, the day-to-day practicality of you want to have your own business, but the day-to-day of running the business, looking after the accounts and reaching out to other people and all of that, right? The 100th repetition of the practice that the first 10 repetitions taught you, right? And the trine's gift is that it makes change feel natural. The trine's demand is that natural change requires long-term sustained engagement and effort day to day, practical, looking after your mind, body and soul needs. As I said, some days you just have 5 minutes, other days you have an hour, some days you have 3 days, some months you have a whole weekend, some you just have like that 10 minutes, right? So it's about, long-term engagement to produce genuine transformation rather than just it looking good on the outside and the aesthetic reorganization, right? Just, doing a tarot, wearing the spiritual clothes, whatever. It's about getting back up after each failed attempt to reach your goals. And the 5 exact passage of Uranus is trying to Pluto offer 5 opportunities to check in with your commitment. So in July 2026, the initiation period, right? You can ask yourself, what is being committed to? What is the direction of this long-term engagement, right? By the time we get into November 2026, this is the first check-in. Is the commitment holding through the first retrograde, with self-reflection, examination? What do you need to change? What habits do you need to do more of? You have to change your bedtime, change your social circle, change your thought process, get help from a therapist. It's about being the mystic and knowing that sometimes you may have to take mental health medication. There's nothing wrong with that. It's about getting the right tools and the right help for you. As we get into June 2027, it's the deepening, the further that pass at the higher degree, not the same commitment on repeat, but the commitment, changing, deepening into more specific engagement. And by the time we get into January 2028, it's the consolidation, right? It's not starting over, it's the continuing what was established now at a level of integration, what was established during that time, and thinking, what level of integration that wasn't available in 2026. By the time you get to January 2028, what you established in 2026, how is it being integrated in 2028, nearly 18 months after the 2026 peak, right? And as we get into May 2028, this is the completion at the highest degree. So what does the commitment look like after 2 years of long-term sustained engagement, right? Getting back up after each 4, going out there, looking at resources, creating your own resources, starting your own podcast, continuing it, and all of that. So the development mechanism is the commitment itself, not as a constraint, but as the container, the space within which genuine transformation becomes possible. You cannot know what grows across 2 years of consistent practice until you've done 2 years of consistent practice to try and ask for long-term engagement that produces what the initial breakthroughs cannot. The body signal for this development edge is restlessness, the specific restlessness of the nervous system that finds consistency boring. Uranus's electrical quality reads the repetitive return to established practice as stagnation. The body wants novelty, the body wants the lightning bolt again. The practice is learning to distinguish, tell the difference between 2 kinds of restlessness. The restlessness that is calling you towards genuine movement, genuine change, when the committed practice has genuinely been completed and the next thing genuinely needs to begin. And the restlessness that is trying to escape the discipline of the long arc, when the practice is genuinely producing transformation, but the nervous system is bored by consistency and looking for exit, right? And the body signal for healthy, sustained long-term commitment has a different quality than either the excitement of breakthrough or the deadening of stuck repetition. It's a kind of aliveness that is quieter, than excitement, but more alive than, feeling neutral. The feeling of returning to something that is genuinely yours, that carries your mark, that has developed specific character through, long-term engagement. This feeling, distinguish, tells the difference between long-term commitment and, the obligation that is masquerading as commitment, like you have to go to your job that you may not really like because you've got to pay the bills, versus genuine commitment. You doing something that you actually want to do, you want to become your own boss one day, so you make a 10-year plan and you commit to it over, the 10 years, not seeing, it's 10 years, it's going to be long, and then 10 years comes so quickly and you're still in the same position. It's about making those long-term plans and getting back up after each, 4, so choose one material, practical practice and commit to it across the full arc of the triangle from 2026 to 2028, not conditionally, not saying, not I'll do this until it starts feeling right, but a commitment made before you know whether it will feel right. Check not just the practice, but your relationship to it across 4 seasons. Notice what changes in the practice. Notice what you learn in the 3rd year that was unavailable in the 1st year, Notice whether the commitment produces something in you that no amount of starting new things has produced, right? The long arc reveals itself only through completion. So, start something, one thing. For some of you, it'd be more than one thing, and follow it through over the magic triangle period, right? But the 4th development and final one is what your transformation owes the collective, so your individual changes. So Neptune sets down Pluto as the slowest moving aspect in the triangle. It has 6 exact passes from July 2026 to November 2028 and continues after the triangle, right? And it asks a question that individual transformation narratives, the language of personal growth, healing journeys and conscious evolution, right, growth, characteristically avoid. And the question is, what does your transformation owe to people who couldn't access it? Because, I'm a great believer that we're not all here to learn the same things in this lifetime, and it's not about, being awake. It's about keeping awakening, and it's not about using any knowledge, whether it be spiritual, religious, or intellectual, or any other thing, money status, to say, well, because I have this X amount of money or knowledge, or I'm this religious, I'm better than you. No one is better than anyone, because I believe we all go through all lifetimes, from the worst possible things a human can do to another, to the lifetimes where we're, great philanthropists giving back and stuff like that, and these things don't always come from, within. It comes from lifetime of experiences of maybe not doing the right things, right? So in terms of, what does your transformation owe the collective who can't access it, whether, they're not here this lifetime to do so because they've got any physical or, mental or any other disability that, gets them down so much that they're not available, right? And it's not about guilt, it's not about thinking you're better than others. As I said, it's a developmental question. I believe people have to get sick of their own sickness before they stop doing certain things anyway. So it's the ability that's being asked for is, the movement from transformation as an end in itself to transformation as the beginning of service, right? From how do I change to what does my change offer to the conditions that prevented others from changing, right? And the Savana Nat Sacrum, which Pluto operates during this arc, makes this specific, right? Venusa's 3 strides were not for his own expansion and growth, they were for the restoration of what had been unjustly taken, right? The structural transformation Pluto is completing is asking not just what structures die, what routine, relationships, thought patterns, addictive tendencies, die, but what is being restored by their dying. What are you restoring? What are you learning new by letting go of the past, right? And who receives what was hoarded, what for some people it'd be wealth that's hoarded from the many who, can't afford to, get the right healthcare, feed their children, educate their children and stuff like that, right? So, on the, to maybe information that that you're keeping from others, maybe a family member or friend or lover. And sometimes we have to keep some information, because sometimes information can hurt people and they may not be in the emotionally right state to hear it, but sometimes, we withhold things and that's not right either. So it's about fine balance, right, in life, right? So the Neptune Pluto sets out our vision, and to use our vision to guide routine transformation. And the practical mechanism of this development is the honest audit, asking what access have I had to the transformation this triangle offers, right? And what structural conditions prevented or limited that access for others, right? The access questions are material. Who could afford the retreat? Who could take the time away from work? Whose body could handle the practice, the spiritual practice, yoga, tai chi? Not everybody can get into the movements, right? And that doesn't make them less spiritual than someone who can, right? You know, maybe asking who's housing around the kind of stability that makes long-term inner work possible. Some people are unhoused, right? Some people don't live in their household where they can have time to themselves, right? You know, whose race, gender, class, disability status or immigration status either enabled or prevented access to the exact kind of transformation that you've been doing, right? It's about getting realistic. Not everybody, you know, a lot of people, as I said, they like to say everyone's got the same 24 hours in a day, and that is really true. We do waste a lot of time, whether it's Netflix and too much Netflix and chilling and just procrastinating, right? Well, if you've got 24 hours in a day, but you've got 7 PAs or help to help you, you know, raise your children, take care of your accounts and all the paperwork and housework, then it's not the same 24 hours in a day, is it? So the service questions follow directly from honest, you know, access answers, you know, not access service, the specific offering that comes from what you specifically access, right? The person who access depth, you know, deep psychological work in the context of material stability and support, or something different to the collective than the person who accessed it through difficulty and constraint and limitation. You know, as I said, some people have the time and the resources to meditate 24/7 hours of the day, not have their mobile phones on and all of that. Some people don't have that level of access. So what we owe to the collective is different, right? The service is specific because the access was specific. The body signals this development edge through, you know, 2 distinct sensations. The first is the discomfort of recognition, the specific feeling when you become aware that what you've accessed was not equally available on what you've been treating, and that, you know, you've been treating it as if, you know, the access to these things were equal. This discomfort is not guilt, which is a performance, but information. It says you know something now that changes what's appropriate, you know. You know, sometimes we can not think and we do things and we believe things. So this is why we should be constantly questioning our beliefs as we get older, right? And, you know, trying to look at ourselves objectively, because sometimes we look at ourselves subjectively and we can miss the nuances, right? So as I said, the first is, you know, discomfort recognition, the specific feeling when you become aware that what you've accessed was not equally available and that you were treating it as if it were equally available, right? And then the second is the settling that arrives when transformation becomes genuinely useful to someone else's life, right? Not useful in the sense of being impressive or confirming your development, useful in the sense of materially, practically improving the conditions of another person's existence, right? When this happens, when your transformation becomes a resource for collective ability and skill, rather than just evidence of your own growth, the body settles in a way that nothing else produces. This settling is the sign that the set style is activated once per quarter, so once every 4 months, right? 3 months during this magic triangle. Ask yourself 2 questions in writing. Who in my life or community cannot access the transformation or doesn't have the resources and time that I have, right? And can't access the transformation I've been through, and why? And what one specific thing could I do to reduce that gap this quarter? Not in the abstract, not being more supportive, just saying it, the specific material action or actions that, closes that gap, that uses what you've accessed to create access for someone who couldn't reach it in the same way you did. The quarterly rhythm creates accountability across the timeline of 3 years without making the question so constant that it produces paralysis where you're like, oh, I can't do nothing. Some of you may be able to, help one person. Some of you may be able to help 10 or 20 or 30 or 50 by a podcast, being realistic. also not having the guilt for the past that can, weigh us down and make us not be able to move right, but just getting real on, who's got the time, the energy, the resources, the wealth to do certain things, and trying to bring more equality and realism into your spiritual practice to be grounded right. And when I go into 8 practices, I'm going to talk about how you can ground this in reality a bit more. So now I'm just going to spend some time and talking on how the magic triangle affects relationships, right? How it reshapes collective relating, communication, and what the triangle does to every relationship that we're in, right? So this is not about your specific partnerships or who you should be with. It's about the patterns of collective relationships, relating, communication, that this magic triangle is changing for everyone alive during this period, right? So we've got more AI that's changed the way we communicate. I listen to a lot of podcasts and people are saying it's making us more soulless. People are not giving responses and just letting AI generate them, and it's causing more disconnection. Some people are having relationships with AI now. I'm not saying this is right or wrong. For some people it's the right path, but the way that we relate to each other will change, right? The power moves through relationships, the way vision creates and destroys collective bonds, the way genuine difference shows up in intimacy and what it requires, right? So power in collective spaces and what transformation does to authority. And since 2020, Pluto in Capricorn has been letting go of the old structures. We had the COVID outbreak, right? The old way of life, our life has changed, right, in a lot of ways that I mentioned in part 1 and 2. It organised collective relating through unexamined hierarchies and structures, right? The corporation, the non-profit, the spiritual community, the activist organisation, the marriage contract, the religious institution, all of these have been under structural examination for years and will continue to be so the longer Pluto remains in Capricorn, right? So the question Pluto is asking each of them is the same: who holds power here, and does that arrangement serve the stated purpose? The collective that named its power arrangement is neutral, inequitable, or divinely ordained, and has spent years, 6 years defending and naming against Pluto's examination. We have a lot of tension in our nations right now, right? Maybe also in the spiritual communities where the founder's authority is unchallengeable, not because the founder earned it through integrity, but because the community's structure and hierarchy and power dynamics make it impossible to challenge, right? And the organisation that talks about freedom and liberation for all, while reproducing exactly the hierarchical dynamics that the liberation, the freedom was supposed to dismantle. The relationship that named love as the reason one person consistently made the decisions, the imbalances, the word salads, the trying to make it look good while underneath it's still the same crap, different day, right? The characteristic move of this shadow, reframing legitimate critique of the power arrangement as disloyalty. If you talk out against the system, you're not loyal, you're low in consciousness, or you fail to understand the vision and where we're going. We're in a new world now, we're in a technological world, we need to do this or that, and the person who asks who benefits from this arrangement and who doesn't is positioned as the problem rather than the question itself. So the healthy version of how this makes our relationships better is, the collective that has done the actual work of examining its power arrangements with the same kind of hardness and vigour and severity it applies to examining external injustice, right? The organisation who, where authority flows towards those with genuine ability in that relevant domain and remains accountable to the whole, to the shareholders, to the customers that buy the products or services, right? The relationship where both people, all people involved, because we have a lot of FOPL and other dynamics now. So, the relationship where people both people can name what's not working without naming being experienced as betrayal or disloyalty, and the specific work this transit asks of us in terms of our relationships during 2025 to 2028 is not just a flippant rhetorical commitment to accountability, but structural routines and mechanisms, structural change, right? Who can challenge a decision? What happens when they do? Who leaves when there's conflict and who stays? What resources flow towards these priorities? These are questions to ask. These questions have material answers that reveal the actual power arrangement, and that's distinct from the stated one, right? And the Savana teaching, which is Vishnu listening, applies directly. The power arrangements that deserve to survive this period are the ones that have been genuine, listened to what they were doing to people, the ones that haven't listened will continue ending, composting, regardless of how good their stated intentions are, because, faith without works won't do, talk without practice won't do. The word salads rather of, being sustainable, but you're dumping a lot of chemicals or using a lot of resources, technology, AI uses a lot of electricity. We've seen a lot of increase in power outages across our nations, and these continue, right? So in terms of vision and projection in our community bonds and relationship, Neptune at the triangle's apex of the magic triangle means that relationships formed through shared spiritual vision are practically vulnerable during this period, right? The bond of shared seeing, the feeling of recognition when you meet someone who sees what you see, the community of people that are orientated towards the same understanding of what matters is real. It is also fragile in specific ways that Neptune makes more accurate, right? Two characteristic failures. The first is the bond that dissolves when the vision is questioned. Communities built on Neptune shared seeing often have an implicit arrangement. We are together because we all see this. So what happens if someone don't? When someone within the community begins to see things differently, or to question whether what they're seeing is actually what they think, it puts the bond under pressure, right? The response reveals whether the community is genuinely based on shared seeking and equality, or simply on shared arrival at a fixed position. Like, we all have to agree this no matter what, even if we're having the debates that looks on the surface that we're being, a sort of equality, So it's asking, does the questioning strengthen the community through honest engagement and being open to everyone's questions, or does it position the questioner as a threat, right, or someone who doesn't understand the vision, or is, inferior or something like that? So the second failure is the projection of the collective shadow onto individuals in any community built around shared vision. The parts of reality that don't fit the vision must go somewhere, right? And under Neptune's apex, they tend to go onto people who raise them, right? The person who says this isn't working, because the person who becomes the person who's not aligned because they call it out, right? And the person, who asks about the power dynamics becomes the person who doesn't trust the process. The collective shadow is externalized onto one who tried to hold it internally. The healthy version of this is the community that has developed the ability to remain in genuine conversation with its own vision. Sometimes we may start something and the vision may seem great, but then as we get older in our spiritual understanding, because as I said, awakening is typically a circular movement rather than a straight long line. We are always arriving, never arrive sort of thing. And this is not to, be scary or anything like that, saying that, you can't ever arrive, but it's about, the community developing the ability to remain in genuine conversation with its own vision, to hold the vision and examine it at the same time, to question it. This requires something specific, the structure ability for members to see and to say, I once seen it like that, but I see this differently now, without that being experienced as an attack on the belonging itself, right? The communities that survive this transit with their vision intact are the ones where questioning has been built into the structure, not tolerated despite the structure, right, and the system of the community. Neptune sextile to Pluto is asking, is the vision serving the community's collective freedom, or is the community serving the maintenance of the vision without questioning it, right? The difference is the difference between genuine teaching and a cult, right? And we've seen a lot of, cults being exposed, and there's still a lot going on in our world today. And the practical relationship test, are you really in community? Are you really in relationship? Is in your community when something comes up and someone raises genuine difficulty or questions something, names something that isn't working, questions an assumption, brings a perspective and a belief that challenges the main core beliefs, what happens? Does the conversation that follows deepen the collective's ability and togetherness and relationship, because the key word is in relationship is relating and communicating. Like, are you relating to each other, or does the person that question the community find themselves less welcome, right? And why is that? Because of course sometimes people are being disrupted for the sake of it, but there's ways of dealing with things, right? So it's about getting real and not being scared to question and being open to questions, right? Now I'm going to talk a bit about how in relationships that we can stay in contact with each other when the material differences are real, aka the conversations that most people don't have but should, right? So the earth, water, Sunni says togetherness. We have Uranus and Pluto in earth signs, Taurus and Capricorn, and Neptune's in the water sign in Pisces, right? So this is the triangle's foundation and produces a specific relationship challenge that this era is asking people to develop their ability and the capacity for the ability to remain in genuine intimacy across real, material, structural differences between people. And we have a lot of tension, right? People fighting because of different religions and different expressions and all the rest of it. A lot of tension across the world's nations right about now, as I said, and this is distinct from the spiritual principle that we are all one. That is like, that principle is Neptune's gift, right? The work being asked for us to do, right, is different. It's remaining in genuine contact with a specific other person across a specific material differences, religion, belief system, whatever that exists between you, without requiring either person to pretend those differences don't exist. Two distinct failures, each appearing virtuous. So the first is the intimacy that collapses and fades, goes away when difference becomes visible. So bonds form during peak transformational experiences in a ceremony, a retreat, in a said intensity of political action or any form of activism that cannot survive the return to ordinary life, while the material differences between people reassert themselves, right? So maybe one person has housing stability, the other person doesn't. One person has time for practice, do the things that they need to have free time. The other is working 3 jobs. One person's race or gender or citizenship status creates conditions of daily life that the other person doesn't experience and hasn't had to deal with, right? Some of us live in the West, we have a different to people that live in some countries, even though freedom of speech is getting worse in Western countries, right? But in countries where, it's a dictatorship, we don't quite live in those in the West, although we're kind of getting there, right? But we still have the semblance of freedom of speech and being able to get on with our day-to-day life in ways that certain people living in some countries don't, right? So when these differences become visible, the bond built on shared visions reveals whether it was, has the structure ability to hold them, or was it just the fact that you've had this peak experience in the retreat, but in day-to-day life you really don't have no connection. You're in the space that was holding all these differences, but in the practical real world where we have to make contradictions and paradoxes meet, right, it doesn't hold water. And the second failure mode is the intimacy that refuses to see difference at all. the we are all one relationship that uses Neptune's dissolving quality to merge away from the reality that structured differences between people are material and consequential. The relationship where claiming universal human connection becomes the reason not to, confront how the specifics of your respective lives create different conditions, ignoring that there are differences, that people have different conditions, different access to resources and different demands on their time and energy, right? This is Neptune at its most seductive and most dangerous, right? This solution of difference that is actually the refusal to look at the differences. So the healthy version of using this energy is the intimate bond that has had the specific uncomfortable conversations, not the general conversation about how are you feeling about our relationship. The specific one, the conditions of my life differ from the condition of yours in these specific ways. Those differences affect what I can offer, what I can receive and what I need from you. How do we stay in genuine contact given that most people don't have this conversation? It requires more willingness to be seen accurately, not ideally, not through the shared visions, flattering lens that most relationship and relating cultures prepare people for, but the real raw facts of, in some countries you can't even wear certain colours, and that's just a simple thing, what we may take for granted. And it requires the ability to remain in contact with what the answer reveals, including the possibility that some of what the vision said about the relationship is not fully supported by the material reality, right? So the magic triangle is wanting us to ground our spirituality. That's why we've got, Uranus and Pluto, Uranus and Taurus and Pluto and Capricorn grounding Neptune, right? And then that sacred teaching for this dynamic where Uranus is in Rahini, and that creates, and Savannah is in Pluto that listens. The healthy, intimate relationship across genuine difference is one in which the creating and the listening alternate without either disappearing. You make yourself known, which is Rahini energy. The other person genuinely hears what you have made known. This is the Savannah energy. Then they make themselves known. Then you hear them. This exchange, not a merger, not distance, but genuine alternation between making, knowing, between making known and receiving is what the triangle is developing the ability for in our intimate relationships and all relationships. And the specific caution from 2026 to 2028 is that the era's intensity as we wind down this decade, right, will generate many bombs formed in shared transformational fire, and these bonds will feel more deep and profound because they are formed in profound circumstances. The question worth asking about each one is, does this bond have the ability to hold the ordinary differences between us when the shared fire becomes ordinary life? Are these relationships, if you just have online relationships, can they work in real life, right? And the bonds, the relationships that answer yes are the ones worth building towards, and the ones who answer no, if you can't fix them, are the ones that you need to let go of, right? Okay, so now I'm going to talk about actionable guidance that we can take, right, to bring all of these magic triangle, don't call them demands, but teachings to life, right? So 8 ways to start reading about transformation and start doing it, which is what the magic triangle wants us to do, right? The magic triangle doesn't activate through understanding and talking, it activates through practice and doing after all, right? So, these are not just suggestions, they're requirements if you want to use the triangle instead of watching it pass, So, practice 1 is food, energy, water. Your nervous system knows the difference, and this is the Uranus and Taurus somatic energy working with our body, right? So what we need to do is to reduce our dependency on centralized system for basic needs, food, energy, water, shelter, increase local, decentralized, self-sufficient ability. So if you've got a garden, start growing in it, start growing in your house, cress, microgreens, stuff like that. Try and take some ownership over your food source. Why? Because Uranus in Taurus revolutionizes our material reality, and your body is a material reality, and sovereignty, freedom, means your nervous system relaxes because survival doesn't depend on systems that could collapse or be withheld. And we have seen, especially in my country, the UK, shortages in food that never used to be there, little by little as well, and we've taken for granted that we will always have things, right? So how to do this year by year in 2026? Establish one sovereign foundation. Choose food, energy or water. So as I said, food, start growing something edible, herbs on the windowsill, vertical garden, growing in your own garden if you got one, community plots, say, renting an allotment in the UK or something like that, if you can get one right. But yeah, in terms of energy, install one renewable source like solar charger, a battery backup, a bike generator. Water, establish a backup supply like a filtration system, rainwater collection if legal, and store reserved, right? In 2027, expand to the second area. If you started with food, add energy and water. So food expansion, preserve, harvest, canning, fermenting or drying. Learn one wild edible that grows around you, if you can find one. Connect with local growers, buy from local farm shops or people growing food, right? In terms of energy growth, reduce consumption of energy, 20% food behavioural changes, LED bulbs, line drying clothes, be more efficient, wearing clothes more than once if you can, if they're not dirty. In terms, even though it may sound disgusting, and for some people it could be, but it's about preserving resources that we have learned to depend on what may become more scarce, because as I said, the rise in technology means a rise in computers. We've got loads of super data centers taking a lot of resources, so these things can become very real, so maybe you could try, in terms of water growth in 2027, a grey water system for your garden, low flow fixtures, a spring wow access if you will live in the country. Maybe in 2028 integrate the third area you didn't work on before, so now all three bases are covered at the basic level. So food, 20% of your diet from local or self-grown sources. Energy, one major system independent, heat, light or communication, powered renewably. Water, 7 day supply stored if you can, if you've got the filtration capacity, or just having some bottled water, because you never know when the tap may not work right. And I know there's countries where there's no tap water anyway, so obviously work in alignment with the resources available to you. So your body knows sovereignty, freedom. So when you have a backup of food, energy, water, your nervous system changes from survival mode, cortisol, contraction, fear, to safety mode, relaxation, expansion and creativity. Track this. Notice how growing your own food changes your relationship to the grocery store. This changes Uranus, Taurus in your body, right? The second practice is spiritual grounding practice. This is Neptune, Uranus' sextile, right? So, what to do. One mystical insight per week lands in one material change. Vision becomes form. The aviator lands from the Sabian symbol, right? And why? Because Neptune sextile Uranus requires activation for you to actively work with this energy. Your spiritual practice means nothing if it doesn't recognize material reality, grounded mysticism or useless clouds, right? So how do you do this, right? So in 2026, start daily spiritual practices or continue meditation, prayer, ceremony, silence, dream work, art, music, track insights. Weekly, translate one insight into material action. So some examples are, this, you say my body is a temple. Then the outcome of that would be I stop eating food that contracts me and goes against this, right, and makes my body not a temple. Saying things that were interconnected, like you will source one necessity from a neighbour instead of a corporation or someone local. Time is a construct, that thinking. I refuse one deadline that serves extraction, not curation, right? So to make room for you to do something that benefits you. if you're gonna, if you say things like scarcity is manufactured, say resources I have been hoarding, because maybe there's a lot of food that grows across the world, but it's the distribution, right? Not getting it to the people that need it, the medicines and healthcare to the people that need it. So it is manufactured, but it's still the real thing as well. Going back to what I was saying about more than two things being true at the same time. So as we get into 2027, in terms of grounding your spiritual practice, add one monthly ceremony specifically asking what wants to land, what needs to come into practical reality by me doing practical actions to make it a reality, right? Then make it a practical reality by making it land, doing what it takes, right? And the ceremony, doing this creates a container space for Neptune's mystical vision and to help Uranus's practical material intervention changes newness land, right? So the monthly rhythm allows bigger landings, not just stop eating one food but change entire diet, not just share one resource but reorganize the economic relationship with your community, right? In 2028, integrate your spiritual practice and material life, and there should be one now, no separation. Mysticism is your material choices. Matter, practicality is your spiritual expression. So, to check if this is working for you, check, can you go 1 week where every material decision, what you eat, buy, do, consume, create, share, is informed by spiritual practice? If yes, this set style is activated. If no, then it's still compartmentalized and you have to, keep on working on bringing it together. So in terms of the somatic check, how you feel it in your body, grounded mysticism feels different in the body than escapist spirituality. Grounded, your spine lengthens, your feet feel more rooted, your breath deepens, your presence increases, right? In your day-to-day life, you're more present in your relationships with your own, inner self, all your needs, right? If you're in escapist mode, the energy lifts to the head, the body goes numb, dissociation, wanting to numb yourself, going to the toxic energy of Neptune, right? Getting lost in addiction and avoidance, right? In that floaty feeling, trying to always chase the next high. So track what your practice creates and adjust until it grounds you, right? The third practice is Pluto's demands, So Pluto demands us to name what's dying and stop fighting it. And, the compass practice, witness death and choose what grows, so this is Pluto in Capricorn's need. So how do we do this? We have conscious engagement with what's dying in our life, not fighting to preserve it, and keep it right, but we still don't force it to die faster either. We witness death, allowing death, trusting and letting go action, right? And why do we do this? Because Pluto transforms through death and rebirth. So fighting death, trying to resurrect what's dying, prevents transformation. Forcing death, killing what's still alive, creates trauma, not us composting and letting go. So this practice changes us to recognize death, the things that need ending, allowing the natural timeline of, letting go and to compost consciously. So in 2026, identify 3 things actively dying in your life. It could be a relationship, a job, a belief, identity, a pattern, a place, a community practice. The dying announces itself. You feel contraction, exhaustion, completion, emptiness, where you used to feel alive, right? Aliveness. For each of it, name it. This relationship is dying. This job is ending. This identity is composting. Speaking it aloud makes death more conscious, right? Then don't fight it. Don't try and resurrect it and save it. Let it die. Witness without interfering. That's the hardest practice. Your instinct screams, save it. Pluto says some things deserve death, let them go. In 2027, for what died in 2026, track the compass. What soul did it become right? What's growing from it? Because composting, gardening, you can grow new life from old life, right? So, for example, a job died in 2026. Freedom from wage labour, that's the soil. Started community project that actually serves, that's new growth from compost. This trains you to think that death isn't the end. Death is transformation. Death is something of letting go and letting something else be created, right? What died didn't disappear. It became soil, feeding new life, new creations, new thoughts, new habits. Tracking this makes death less terrifying, and you learn that letting things die is how new things live. And in 2028, advanced practices notice what's dying and let it die, and consciously decide what you're planting in the new compost, right? The soil is neutral, it grows whatever you plant. If a job dies and becomes freedom soil, you can plant healing practice, creative work, community service, or shadow. Bitterness, resentment, and victimhood is the shadow of this, right? So conscious composting, letting go, means I choose what grows from what died. And death can feel like a contraction, going back, exhausting, emptying, completion, or winter, right? If you're trying to resurrect and hold on to what's dying, your body fights. You can feel more tension in it, more gripping, right? If you allow death, your body releases, softening, crying, grieving, letting go. Track the difference. Let your body teach you how to die, right? So the fourth practice is power redistribution. Audit your power and redistribute it, or reclaim it, right? So this is what Neptune sets down to Pluto wants, right? So audit power in your life, where you have it, how you use it, where it contracts, right? Then redistribute towards the collective good instead of individual hoarding, thinking about where power concentrates and is not shared, right? And you do this because Neptune sets down Pluto equals vision, guiding transformation of power. So your spiritual values mean nothing if they don't change how power is used. So claiming we're all one while hoarding resources is bypassing, right? And I spoke more about this in part 1. So in 2026, do a power audit. List everywhere you have power over others or systems: economic, money, property, inheritance, investment, social, race, gender, citizenship, ability, education, connections, institutional, job authority, credentials, licenses, physical, size, strength, mobility, knowledge, expertise, information, access, literacy. For each, ask, how am I using this power to serve the collective or self, to liberate or dominate, to redistribute or hoard? Be honest. No spiritual bypassing. If you have economic power and use it only for personal comfort while calling yourself spiritual, that's power hoarded, not redistributed, right? In 2027, choose 3 power areas to redistribute. So examples are economic. Contribute a percentage of income wealth to mutual aid, repatriations and community resources, not charity. This keeps power, right? Redistribution, this shares power. If you can do that. Social, use any privilege you have to increase marginalised voices, open doors you have access to, and refuse positions, opportunities, unless it, benefits the collective. And the many instead of the few, right? If you have knowledge, teach what you know freely, right? Translate expertise into accessible language and refuse to gatekeep behind credentials. The redistribution should cost you something. If it's comfortable, it's not redistribution, it's performance. In 2028, integration, right? Power distribution is automatic now. Your default is share power, increase collective, refuse individual accumulation, not the rule you follow, but the reality you become. And of course you've got to set boundaries, right? And respect others' boundaries. It's not about giving your power away, but seeing what you can do to help others, right? So, you can check in terms of your body. Does your power serve collective freedom or individual comfort? If liberation, Neptune, Pluto is activated, if it's comfort, it's still hoarding, or, not using your own power. You have to empower yourself as well. Step into your own power, use your natural gifts, even though you may think, I don't have any natural gifts, or I can't do this because I don't have that credential, or whatever. So many people are doing it. I believe that everyone's got a niche, and can say things in certain ways that only the people that will listen to you will listen to it. There could be 100 other people, saying the same message, but if some people are simply not going to listen to those people saying it. They're going to just listen to how you say it, right? So that's the magic out there, Don't think, it's too late to start my social media, my content, or whatever. No, if you have knowledge and you can share it, it's not just about money. Sometimes it's information. What have you learned from your life experiences? This can help others, right? Each one teach one, sort of thing. So the 5th practice is collective over individual, right? So how we can integrate what this magic triangle really wants us to do, right? Again, it's not about ignoring your needs as an individual, but it's seeing how can your individual enlightenment, you looking after all your needs, help others, right? So one practice per month that serves the collective good with zero personal benefit. Not serving the collective helps me to language, serving collective even when it costs you. Why? The triangle is collective teaching, right? The Natsakras all involve group deities, Sabian symbols, soul community themes, aspects are generational, right? So if you're only using it for personal development, because Uranus, Neptune, Pluto are generational planets, right? So if you're only using them for personal development, you're missing the teaching. So in 2026, start a monthly practice, choose one, maybe a skill, share, teach something you know, no payment, and that anyone can access. Resource share, food, tools, space, knowledge, time, share freely. Label share, help with someone else's project, no reciprocity expected, land share. If you have land or a yard, let others grow food there. Important, no benefit to you. Not networking and not karma accumulation. Not I feel good helping. Just the collective needs this. I can offer it. I offer it, I give. In 2027, expand it to bi-weekly if you can, helping someone without any benefit twice a month. Serve the collective with zero personal gain, and this gets harder. Monthly sustainable, bi-weekly starts costing time, resources and energy need for yourself. So this can be helping out a charity shop, homeless out, or stuff like that. That's the practice, choosing collective even when individual would be easier, but make sure you keep yourself safe, because I'm aware that the streets are getting more and more wild, people are getting more unpredictable, and this is not to bring any fear or whatever, but help others in safe ways. So by the time you get to 2028, try to do this weekly, one practice per week, serving the collective. And by now, this isn't a sacrifice, it's how you live. Serving the collective is as natural as serving yourself. The boundary between self and the collective has shifted and changed, not dissolved, that's bypassing, but reorganised. You're thriving and collective, thriving. You thriving and collective thriving are blended together, not separate, right? So the 6th practice is body before mind. So the somatic yes or no as a primary guidance, and this is the Uttarabhadrapada instinctive knowing teaching, right? So how do you do this? What is this? Every decision is checked against body wisdom, right, before the mind decides. So somatic yes or no was primary guidance, asking your body and listening to your gut or whatever part of the body for the answer. And Uttarabhadrapada, that chakra where Neptune is throughout the triangle, is serpent consciousness, instinctive, non-relational, body-based knowing. Your mind can lie, your body doesn't. This practice change in trusting the body of the mind, because the body, if your back hurts, your back hurts, right? And the reason for this can be from the mind, right? But it's still, the body still holds the score, right? So in 2026, learn your body's yes and no signals. For all people, this is different, right? And then think of something you know is a yes for you, a person you love, food you enjoy, a place you feel safe. Notice in your body, where do you feel a yes? Maybe your chest opens, your belly relaxes, your breath deepens, your warmth and expansion grows, you get an movement. Now think of something you know is a no. The person who harms you, food that makes you sick, a place that drains you, and notice in your body, where do you feel a no? Your chest can contract, your belly tightens, your breath can become more shallow, more cold, more contraction, more of a kind of energy. Your yes and no signals are unique to you. Map them, then use them. Every decision, feel it before thinking it. If it's in your body, that could be a yes, do it. Is it a body no? Then don't do it, right? Is it a body neutral? Gather more info into when you know. By 2027, this should become a more advanced practice. Trust the body even when the mind disagrees. This is where the practice gets real, right? The body says no to a well-paying job. Do you trust it? Body says yes to a person. Mind judges it unsafe. Do you trust it? Mind has reasons. The body has knowledge. Reasons aren't always right. And of course, sometimes we do have to use our mind, don't totally disregard it, because as I said, going back to the safety, and sometimes our body can want things that we shouldn't have, and so it's about finding the balance and sitting with yourself and not rushing decisions, right? Because, if we get to the stage when we can know within our body, reasons aren't always right, but knowing is not ignore the mind completely, as I said, but the body wisdom is primary, the mind the second, right? If the body says no and the mind says yes, investigate. Often the mind wants what serves survival, status and safety. The body wants what serves aliveness, truth and evolution and growth, right? They conflict. If they conflict, maybe it'd be wise to choose your body, but again, this differs for everybody, right? So, check in with yourself, get external help if need be. Safety first over everything, right? So by 2026, we integrate this. Body, wisdom and mind no longer conflict, they work together. Mind provides information, the body provides direction, and together decisions source from the whole being, not just thoughts, right? And to check this, this entire process is somatic. The check is this: are you actually, feeling your body, or just thinking about feelings? Real somatic knowledge is non-verbal, instant, full body, and inarguably, when you're honest, thought about feeling is verbal, delayed, located in the head, and easily argued with, the difference. And, often the body will just say yes or no, right? It's the gut, but then we're like, but why? And then the mind comes in, and then we can change our own guidance into destruction. I've been there many, many times, and I've struggled with that, And what I found going against my gut, leads to more trouble. So the seventh practice is meditating on the Sabin symbols, letting the 14 images teach you non-verbally. So, go back to part 2, listen to the Sabin symbology, research them, draw them if you can, speak about them, work with them, meditate on one Sabin symbol per month from the 14 triangle symbols. Let the image teach you non-verbally. Why? Because Sabin symbols are image consciousness. They teach through metaphor, not concept, and meditation allows symbols to work subconsciously, right? Reorganizing, understanding without intellectually processing them, right? So, how do you do this? Well, maybe in, 2026, meditate on 6 symbols: Taurus 6, 10 and 11, Pisces 6, 10 and 11, and Capricorn 10 and 11. These are the Sabin degrees, 1 per month, January through June. Repeat July through to December. The meditation method is read the symbol text aloud for some of you, or draw it, or whatever it is that works with you. Close your eyes, maybe if you choose meditation, let the image appear, then analyze, witness it, let it move, change, teach 20 minutes daily with the same symbol for the whole month. Journal any insights or voice note them, right? But don't force any meaning, just let the meaning come to you. In 2027, add the remaining 8 symbols of Taurus 8, 13, 15, and Pisces 8, 13 and 15, and Capricorn 13 and 15. Now cycling through all 14 across the year, and as you get to the ending in 2028, the final integration, by now you've meditated on each symbol maybe at least 12 times, maybe. The images are internalized, they teach you automatically. You see the symbols in your daily life, a woman sprinkling water and seeds, which is Taurus 11, maybe when you're looking after any development, arrival in your life, or endings at aviator in the clouds, maybe Pisces 10 when you're ungrounded, an albatross feeding from a sailor, Capricorn 10 when you're learning to trust routine and newness and change, right? The symbols have become your symbolic language for the triangles and teaching, right? So practice 8 is, the triangle activation rituals, Pluto that wants us to compass and let go, Neptune wants us to receive, and Uranus wants us to build, so this is a quarterly practice, so every 3 months, right? It is 3 months, I'm sorry, if we divide it in 12 by 4. Yeah, but anyway, every 3 months. So you do this by engaging all 3 triangle points, so Uranus, Neptune and Pluto at the same time. So it's material, innovation, spiritual vision, death, rebirth, all activated in one ceremony, right? And why? Because the triangle is one teaching expressed through 3 different aspects. Separating them is a learning tool, so the integration requires all 3 working together at the same time. So how do you do this, right? So 2026 to 2028, quarterly, March, June, September, December, so I would write every 3 months. Preparation is, ask yourself, identify what's dying, that's Pluto energy, identify what vision needs to emerge and be born, that's Neptune energy. Identify what material innovation can ground the vision, that's Uranus. So to structure of this ritual should be about 3 hours. So part 1 is death acknowledgement, acknowledging what you need to let go. This is the Pluto hour. Create a death altar, maybe objects representing what's dying, relationship, a job, a belief, or identity, a pattern. Speak the death aloud. This thing is dying. I release it to compost. Sit with grief, rage, relief, whatever comes up, sit with the emotions. Let them move through the body. Burn or bury or destroy objects. Death made conscious, right? Part 2 is the vision reception, right? Being open to newness and vision. So this is Neptune's hour, stillness practice, meditation, silence, dream work, plant medicine, if that's your path, or whatever your path is, art, music, whatever opens your mystical knowing. Ask what wants to emerge from what died. Receive vision, don't force an answer, let it arrive. Sometimes it arrives as an image, a feeling, a knowing, not words. Trust it. Part 3 is material innovation. This is the Uranus 1 hour. Ground vision in form. Ask yourself, what can you build today? What can you practically do today that begins manifesting the vision, your ideals, your habits, your plans, right? Not the whole thing, one material step, right? If vision is community food, self-unity, and material step might be start seedlings, If vision is creative work as primary income, and material step might be register a business name. Small material steps, today. Take the step before the ritual ends. Uranus in Taurus requires your vision landing in material practical action immediately, not the I'll do it tomorrow, which we all do and means we never do the things we want to do. To integrate this, the death, compost, Pluto energy through the vision received Neptune, and to take the practical actions, right, the innovation created Uranus energy, all 3 in one ceremony. The triangle is activated through your body, your action and your consciousness. So in terms of feeling this in your body, the somatic check, its real activation feels like death, contraction, grief, emptying, Vision feels like expansion, clarity, knowing, and innovation feels like embodied, lived, aliveness, action, material engagement, like I'm doing this now. If you skip any part, the triangle stays as potential instead of manifesting, right? So practical action is, the way. And these 8 practices aren't the only ways to activate the triangle, but they're the minimum baseline. As I said, if these are just ideas, research ideas that work better for you, practices that work better for you, tweak anything that I said, merge practices, make it your own. And whatever you choose to do, if you're doing everything right by 2028, the triangle works through you. If you're doing fewer than these 8 practices or 8 practices you tailored for yourself, then you only use part of the triangle, not all. If you're doing none, you consume content without transformation, without transforming, right? You spoke a lot, maybe you seeked a lot of information, but you didn't put it into practical action, right? So your choices determines the outcome, right? And that the triangle offers, you either activate it or you don't. The triangle is still going to continue on and on, right? So now I'm just going to talk a bit more about the body in terms of the 3 energies and how they interact with specific areas of your body, right? So as I said, the magic triangle isn't abstract, it moves through bodies. Material revolution and changes, Uranus and Taurus, spiritual vision, Neptune and Pisces, structural transformation, Pluto and Capricorn, all create physical symptoms, body changes and health impacts. And this is not medical advice, I'm not a doctor, this is pattern recognition from astrological transits correlated with somatic body experience, so, check with actual medical professionals for health concerns, right? I talked a lot in the practices about, listening to your body and all of that, so I just wanted to talk about the different areas that each planet rules astrologically in the body. So Uranus and Taurus is the body disruption as a wake-up call, what the symptoms are saying. So Taurus rules the throat, the neck, the thyroid, the jaw, the teeth, the tongue, the vocal cords, the ears, the cerebellum, our balance and coordination, and also the 5 senses, physical pleasure, material comfort, food, relationship, and body image, right? So how this can show up during the 3 years of the magic triangle is we could experience throat and voice changes, and losing our voice, finding our voice, our pitch, our tone shifting, thyroid disruptions. We could have hyper or hypo, so get tested if symptoms, that's the word, comes up. Throat chakra activation, suddenly needing to speak truth that you've been hiding and suppressing. Chronic sore throat with no infection. Body storing unspoken words, You could also feel like it in your jaw. TMJ, so TMJ flares, teeth grinding, jaw clenching, holding tension about material security. Dental issues coming up suddenly, teeth cracking, needing extraction, root canals, jaw release, through body work revealing stored trauma. Your nervous system could have a sudden sort of like startled responses to thinking, increase, more jumpy, because of Uranus's electrical disruption, vertigo, dizziness, balance issues because of cerebellum activation, inner ear pressure, so get help for all of these, if any of these as a continue come up, or, ask the body, why is this happening, look at your sleeping patterns, your food, taking enough vitamins, stuff like that. Restlessness can happen also, you can't stay still, pacing, your body wanting to move, innovate and change, Uranus influence again. Sensory changes, you can have an increased sensitivity to sound, light, texture, taste, smell, synesthesia experiences, senses bleeding together, sudden food intolerances, body rejecting what it previously tolerated. So what this means is your body is waking up to what material reality actually is beyond conditioned response. Taurus is I have, that's some keyword in astrology, I have, and Uranus says what do you actually have versus what you think you should have. Body felt disruption, forces you to pay attention to your material reality as felt and lived experience instead of just a concept, right? So getting things right, looking at your finances, looking after your home environment more, looking after your personal hygiene and appearance more, and stuff like that. So to work with this in terms of your voice, if your throat closes, what are you what aren't you saying? If your voice activates, what needs speaking? Jaw, T and J is holding material security, fear, breath work, somatic release, financial, freedom work as well. And of course, with all of these going to rule out any actual physical reasons for any of this. In terms of nervous system, do some grounding practices, feet on earth, cold water, weighted blankets. Your body needs regulation, during all the changes you're going to put it through. In your senses, honour your increased sensitivity. You're becoming more, alive, not less. Trust the information that your senses give you. Neptune in Pisces, letting go of boundaries and spiritual sensitivity. What happens to your body when separation is an illusion? So Pisces rules your feet, your toes, your lymphatic system, your immune system, your pineal gland, your subtle energy bodies, also, sensitivity, psychic reception, you're being open to psychic things, intuitive things. Substance processing, including medications, drugs and alcohol, right? You being able to have empathy for yourself and others. So in terms of Neptune transit in Pisces and what this can bring up, right? You can have immune system issues like mysterious illnesses without clear diagnosis, Neptune confusion in immune function, autoimmune flares, the body attacking itself, boundary confusion at a cellular level. This says sensitivity to substances increase like alcohol, drugs, foods, medications, allergies to things that you were never allergic to before. This can be like your immune system resetting, right, in terms of feeling it in your feet and lymphatic system. You could have chronic foot pain without injury, standing on ground that's shifting. That's why you can feel uncertain. So that can be your body showing, putting your attention to it in that way. In chronic foot pain, swelling, edema, fluid retention, your lymph system processing, emotional overwhelm. And as I said, with all of these, of course, all that any physical concerns, go and get help from a doctor. If any of these happen as well, get checked over. Always better to be safe than sorry. You could have an increase in fungal infections, because Pisces rules the feet. So, look after that. Your energy and fatigue. You could have chronic fatigue without medical causes, your nervous system processing and collective unconscious involvement can bring on just feeling more fatigued, even though you may be getting enough rest, taking your vitamins, enough water and all of that. You can have extreme sensitivity to other people's energy, absorbing emotions, physical symptoms from others, the need for more sleep, more rest, more stillness than ever before. Spirit work can be exhausting. Your psychic sensory needs as well, your third eye activation, seeing, sensing, knowing things outside, consensus reality, what other people are seeing, you can see things differently. Your dreams can intensify, you can become prophetic, hard to tell the difference from sleep and waking life, So dissociation, derealization, feeling like you're watching life from outside your body. So what does this mean? Well, your boundaries are dissolving, not just psychological, but physical. Neptune in Pisces teaches you're not separate from the collective, from the cosmos, from consciousness itself, but without grounding, this becomes you're lost in everyone else's energy, can't tell where you end and others begin, and you can be drowning in empathy, right? To work with this energy, In terms of working with your immune system, your body is learning to distinguish, tell the difference between what is yours, what is coming from you, the self and the not self, right, at a new level. So support it with clean food, reduce toxins, emotional processing, unexpressed emotions, suppress immune function. In terms of looking after your feet and lymphatic system, grounding practice, literally feet on earth, daily rebounding, jumping on a trampoline or a rebounder. This activates the lymph, dry brushing, salt baths, the physical supports, the energetic, your energy, looking after that. Boundaries are spiritual practice, learning that this is not my energy, knowing what's your energy, looking after your energy hygiene, clearing spaces, knowing when you're absorbing energy versus what is yours, recovering after being in draining situations. You may become more psychically aware, more intuitive, you're opening. This is a gift but requires good judgment. What's your energy versus what's not yours, as I said, and grounding, so opening up doesn't untether you, and integration, bringing visions into material reality. So Pluto in Capricorn deals with death and power in the body. So what that means physically is, Capricorn rules the bones, skeleton, teeth, knees, skin, connective tissues, joints, also aging process, chronic conditions, endurance systems, and, structural integrity. So how this may manifest physically is that in terms of your skeletal system, bone density issues, osteoporosis earlier than expected. This can be internal compassing, chronic joint pain, arthritis, knees especially, bearing the weight of structural transformation. Dental issues, teeth, bones equals, Capricorn structure and routine, and Pluto death, rebirth, sclerosis, structural misalignments are becoming more pronounced, So again, seek out medical attention and rule that out as well. You could have sudden skin conditions, eczema, rashes without a clear trigger, moles, skin tags, changes requiring monitoring. Pluto equals, transformation of the surface, boundaries as well, and you can have accelerated visible aging or suddenly looking younger. So, time distortion, right? It's good looking younger because some of these are a bit scary, right? So looking younger, let's all hope for that one, right? And chronic conditions, long-standing health issues reaching crisis point because Pluto brings the hidden to the surface for transformation. Diagnosis of conditions that were developing silently for years, they reveal, and conditions suddenly heal. Completely death, rebirth, or worsens to a point requiring intervention, so transformation through crisis. You could go through, aging, time things such as feeling both ancient and newborn at the same time. This is death, rebirth, consciousness, the body simultaneously breaking down and building up, composting while sprouting. Relationship to, mortality changing, death becoming less terrifying and a more natural teacher. And what this means is your body structures are transforming. Bones, what holds you up. Teeth, what breaks down nourishment. Skin, boundary between inside and outside. Joints, what allows movement. And all of these going through death and rebirth under Pluto. So what's dying is rigidity, force structure, that's being maintained through fear. What's being birthed is flexibility, natural alignment, structure that's sourced from truth instead of control. So to work with it, skeletal, weight bearing exercises, diets that support your bones, getting enough minerals like magnesium, stuff like that. Alignment work, the physical structure mirrors life structure, so both transforming together. So learning to look after your bones and joints, right? In terms of your skin, your boundary is renegotiating what comes in, what stays out. Skin eruptions equals the body processing what it can no longer contain. Support elimination pathways like lymph nodes, liver, kidneys, drinking enough water, taking enough vitamins to look after these organs doing jumping and lymph node work, right? Chronic conditions, Pluto forces what's hidden to the surface, as I said, so the condition didn't just appear, it's revealed. So, confront the root cause, not just the symptoms, because often the emotional spiritual root requires you to address the spiritual with the physical, right? And, befriend death, even though it's scary, befriend endings. Your body's teaching you all things die. Death, it feeds life, right? Composting is sacred. The old can be the foundation, the soil for the new. So listen. So to integrate all three of these energies together, right? When Uranus disruption and Neptune dissolution and Pluto death and rebirth all activate the body at the same time, 2026 to 2028, the symptoms can combine. So, nervous system overwhelm is electrical disruption that can be caused by Uranus, and boundary dissolution that can be caused by Neptune's need to let go and the structure death that Pluto wants. So your nervous system can be in constant activation, so it feels like you can't regulate, you can feel always on and exhaustion, that rest doesn't fit, so it requires you to ground, to make boundaries on your time and resources while still serving the collective, as I said in the 8 practices, right? In terms of immune confusion, the material awakening of Uranus Taurus body awareness and sensitivity can increase, with Neptune's immune changes and Pluto's structural transformation through, bone, skin, death, rebirth, and immune system reset at multiple levels, so it can feel like constantly getting sick or with symptoms without diagnosis or sudden complete health after years of issues and bad health. You can feel healed because maybe the processing the emotions and stuff just frees up your body's energy. So do things that support your body's transformation instead of fighting it, and accepting the changes that happen. In terms of feeling less energy, we have Uranus's constant change, innovation exhausts us, right? And empathy can drain us, which is Neptune's vibe, right? And the death rebirth demands of Pluto requires energy, and we can feel like we can't keep up our previous activity levels because of this, so it can feel like you need more sleep, more rest, more stillness than seems productive, and it requires you to trust that rest is the work, slowness is appropriate, your body knows what it needs. So to integrate this energy, remember the body isn't breaking, it's transforming. All these symptoms are material reality. Uranus in Taurus energy, right, becoming open to spirit, which is Neptune in Pisces, which requires you to let go and end and go through the death rebirth cycle of Pluto in Capricorn, and your body's literally doing the triangles teaching, so support it by grounding, feet on earth, cold water, weight, physical labor, material engagement, nourishing it, clean food, enough vitamins, magnesium, iron, stuff like that, reducing toxins because your body knows what it needs, having more rest, more than seems reasonable, trust your exhaustion, recoveries, transformation, boundaries, energy hygiene and not mind practice, protection before exposure, and death, acceptance, what's dying in your body, structure, capacity, previous functioning is composting, changing into what's coming up, and newness, new awareness, different relationships to incarnation and living actually different way of being with the material, respect and accept the process. The triangle moves through bodies, and your body is the garden, the AV, the compass pile, all at the same time, right? So honor this. So now I'm going to finish up with 5 reflection prompts that can help you integrate all of this I've talked about and the timeline, and that's the end of this 3-part series and the magic triangle. So let's get on with the reflection prompts, right? So now with these questions, answer them honestly or don't answer them at all. These are not casual journaling prompts. They're designed to crack you open across the 4-year arc, even though I'm doing this in the peak of 2026, right? Answer them honestly or don't answer them at all. spiritual bypassing doesn't serve you at all. So the first question to ask yourself is, whose programming is dying in you and how are you grieving it? Pluto is taking that was never yours to begin with. So the full question is, what structure, beliefs, identities, systems, relationships or patterns did you inherit from family, culture, society, education, religion, economy and so on, right? That the magic triangle is wanting you to let go of. 2026 to 2028, name them specifically. How are you grieving this? How are you resisting this? What soil are you becoming? What new you are you becoming? And Pluto in Capricorn transforms inherited routines and structures and systems. Most of what's dying in your life isn't yours. You inherited it, internalized it, identified with it, and this goes for many of us in the collective, right? But it was always programming, never authentic. The triangle is wanting you to let go, right? It is grace, not punishment, right? This prompt forces you to recognize what's dying. Name whose voice is originally it was, right? It wasn't your voice, so let it go. Grieve the death of the identity you thought was you and trust the compost, the ending. And what honest answer should sound like is, I inherited from my father. Security comes from, a job that crushes your soul but pays reliably. That belief is dying. My job ended 2026 and instead of terror, I felt relief, you might say. I'm grieving the father who needed me to believe that, who couldn't imagine different, right? That, it's alright for your job to crush your soul, but that's okay because at least you got reliable pay, building your own belief system. And maybe, you say, I'm resisting by applying to jobs I don't want because his voice says you need security. The soul this is becoming is that trust that my creative work can sustain me, has been trying to sustain me and look after my needs and give me security, but I wouldn't let it while clinging to his or anyone else's programming. Or I inherited from Christianity or any other religion that suffering is noble, pleasure is suspect, the body is fallen, that I'm dying. My body woke up during Uranus and Taurus and started demanding pleasure, rejecting, me denying it. I'm grieving the child who needed to believe God loved her suffering. I'm resisting by still feeling guilty when I prioritize my body's needs. And the soul here is understanding that incarnation is a gift. Pleasure is prayer. My body's wisdom is more trustworthy than any doctrine. And bypassing answers sounds like everything is perfect. I'm grateful for all my lessons. I realize what no longer serves with love and light. No, that's a performance. This prompt is asking you what specifically is dying. Where did you inherit it? How are you actually grieving it and letting it go? And what is it actually, what is it actually turning into, composting into? The specifics, the mesh, the truth, not the perform, curated, social media version, right? So the second question to ask you is, what's the vision that you keep avoiding? What would it look like if you actually let it land, if you went through with your idea, right? So what spiritual vision, creative calling, revolutionary knowing or mystical instruction has been trying to get your attention for years, maybe decades, but you keep dismissing it, delaying it, or saying it's impossible? What would it look like if you actually let it land in material form in 2026 to 2028? What's stopping you, And why this prompt? Because Neptune, sextile Uranus offers vision, grounding in innovation. The sextile requires activation. Most people have visions that never land. The aviator stays in the cloud because landing seems too hard, too impractical, too risky. And this prompt forces you to admit the vision exists, that you've been avoiding landing it, and what you actually are afraid of, usually failure, visibility, responsibility and success, are typically the things that you're are afraid of. So honest answer should sound like, what you're afraid of is the vision that that won't leave me alone is maybe teaching plant medicine, teaching spirituality, going for that job. I dismissed it. Don't do it, dismiss it because I'm terrified of visibility, don't think I know enough, fear doing harm, convince myself someone more qualified should do this, and if I let it land in 2026 to 2028, I would train with, people who've been offering to teach me, or find people who can teach me, create pilot programs, even if it's messy, trust that my lived experience matters more than perfect credentials, right? And what's stopping me is believing who I am. Who am I to do this instead of who am I not to do this when it's being asked of me. A lot of us have dreams, we feel like ideas we can't do because we feel like we're not qualified, and all of that. But like I said, some people will only listen to you in ways that you deliver things, and as long as you're prepared to upgrade the skills constantly, do the reading, listen to the podcast, do the research, follow ethics, then go for it, right? Maybe for some of you have the vision that you want to do community land choice for queer or other elders, so we don't age alone in the system that still can hate us, right? And maybe you say, I delay it because it seems massive, requires money, I don't have the skills, I haven't built for it. If I land it in 2026 to 2028, I'll connect with people already doing this work, learn about land trust structures and start fundraising, even if it's terrifying. That's what you want to sift that belief to, right? As long as you're prepared to go out there, whatever it is you want to start, and find out how to do it, and take the steps and get back up after each failure, you can do it. You can ask yourself, what's stopping me? Is it perfectionism disguised as practicality? Are you waiting for the right time? The right time that never arrived because, I'm scared to begin while it's still messy. And what bypassing answers sound like is, I'm trusting the universe will manifest my vision in divine timing. No, the universe gave you the vision. You landing it is the transformation and the manifestation. Divine timing is now. And the prompt asks, what vision? How would it materialize? What stops you from acting? The specifics, the fear name, the action that you're going to take despite the fear, feel the fear and do it anyway, which is a great book. But yeah, the third question is, where is your power and how are you using it? And this is an honest power inventory, what you have, how you use it and what you hoard, So do an inventory in every area of your life where you may have power, don't have power, economic, social, institutional, physical knowledge, spiritual, intellectual, whatever knowledge you have. Be thorough, include privilege, access, advantages, disadvantages you were born with or have accumulated. Now, is this power concentrated, hoarded for individual benefit or denied for individual benefit, or distributed, shared for collective freedom? What would genuine redistribution like or self-empowerment look like? What are you willing to give up? And why this prompt? Because Neptune's Pluto sextile requires us to allow our ideas, our vision to guide the ways that we transform, the ways that we use power, right? And most people with power, they neither have it, I'm struggling to, or use it only for individual comfort while claiming spiritual values, or deny, hide their power. So this prompt forces acknowledging power honestly, no false humility or modesty, assessing how it's currently being used, serving self or collective, imagining redistribution, material not theoretical, and confronting what you are attached to, keeping the truth under spiritual performance, and what your answer should sound like my power, I'm my colour privilege, my gender privilege, any college education, any professional class, inherited wealth, family home that you eventually receive, or you may not have any of these and you may feel disempowered because of this, and looking at the ways that you can empower yourself even though you don't have any of this, and knowing that true power comes from within, and we can build status, and what status means to you, not what society tells you status is. And If you do have resources, ask yourself how you use it. Is it mostly for personal comfort? Such as I work in a non-profit job, so I feel like I'm helping, but I live in an expensive city, save for retirement and invest in the stock market, so you're profiting from extraction. So genuine redistributions mean giving back, right? Maybe divesting from stocks into community investment funds, eventually signing your family home to a land trust, maybe for people that could benefit from it as well as you, if you've got a lot of land, or if you don't have the power, thinking of ways that maybe, like going back, if you want a land trust and stuff, ways you could get it, not thinking where you started out in life is where you need to end up, and also knowing that you don't need the physical displays of power to be powerful. So if you do have the power, thinking about what I'm unwilling to give up, maybe the retirement account. I'm terrified of aging without financial security, and I don't think you need to give you a retirement plan. That's not sensible. But thinking of ways, if you've got an excess of things, how you can give back, right? Thinking why you hoard, if that's what you do. Is it fear? And how you can allow spirituality in to allow you not to fear that, or maybe your power is physically strong, mobility and privilege, knowledge of multiple languages or advanced degrees, published author, large platform, stuff like that. Ask yourself, how do I use it? My work serves marginalised communities, maybe you can do that, but I still monetize it by charging speaking fees, selling books and building my personal brand. Redistribution could be free versions of everything I create, pay what you can. Sliding scale, always available. Use the platform to increase others' work instead of building my own. Revenue, share with people doing ground level work. I benefit from teaching about what I'm unwilling to give up is the recognition. I want to be known, respected, valued. That desire keeps me from actually redistributing power. I'm sharing information while consolidating my status, and what bypassing answer sounds like. I share my gifts freely with the world through my authentic expression. No, the prompt asks what specific inventory, how you use the honest assessment, how you use the power, how you don't, what redistribution or reclaiming the power would look like, what material changes would you make to your life to use power wisely or to empower yourself, what you are actually attached to keeping, the uncomfortable truth, or what are you, sometimes you don't want to empower yourself because you want to stay in your comfort zone, right? So name the fears, name the truth, thinking of the ways you can empower yourself if you don't already do so, and how you can distribute the power if you hold the power, right? Prompt 4, you can ask yourself, when do you participate in consumption disguised as engagement? The honest accounting of how much did you do versus how much did you read about doing. So this is a question to check in with yourself over the 3 years of the Magic Triangle, right? Looking back across 2026 and 2028. So maybe do this at the end, but I would say to try and do this every 6 months if you can. Looking back over the first period. So the first time you do it will probably be about January 2027, then July, then January 2028, and so on. So think about what you are actually doing, or what did you actually do over the period you analyse, right? Practices, actions, material changes, how you lived your truth versus what you did, like what you consumed, articles read, videos watched, workshops attended, content about transformation without transforming. You're asking yourself how much time is spent learning about the triangle versus activating it. What changed when you move from consumption to practice, right? So the triangle's harmonious aspects, the trines, the set styles, can make consumption feel like activation, like you're doing right. You read about material freedom and independence, feel inspired, think you're transforming, but you haven't actually grown any food or did any of the practices that I've mentioned right in this part. And this prompt forces an honest accounting of action versus consumption, recognizing how much energy went into learning about rather than being with, and acknowledging the difference between information and transformation. So what honest answer should sound like? So, 2026, 90% consumption, 10% practice, such as I read everything about the triangle, watched every video, took astrology courses, joined communities discussing it, but the actual practice would be, you started windowsill, herb garden, right on the windowsills if you got some, or garden, meditated inconsistently, talked about, being free without building it. In 2027, you changed to 40% consumption, 60% practice after realizing reading wasn't transforming you. So it's very important, 2026, you was consuming 90% and 10% practice. As you get into 2027, it's 40-60. You started maybe growing food seriously, daily practice, spiritual things, daily right, monthly death, letting go, composting, ritual, the practices I mentioned earlier in this part, economic redistribution. If you can do that, not everybody can do that, or at least sorting out your finances, right, and using your finances, wisely. In 2028, you're barely just consuming anymore, you're just practicing. So the change is reading about self-divinity, being free, felt safe, performance, no stakes, no risks, right? Because you don't have to actually make any changes in your life, but actually building freedom and failing, looking incompetent, learning from mistakes, facing your fears. Transformation happened in practice, not consumption, and consumption was avoidance disguised as engagement. Or maybe, you may find that I mostly consumed across 2026 and 2028 as you do these 6 monthly check-ins. I collected, and you get to the end, right, you may realize I collected information about the triangle, like spiritual materialism, hoarding knowledge instead of living it and serving it. I can explain saving symbols, but I haven't meditated on them. I know the dates, but I didn't track them in my body. I understand the theory, but I didn't live the practice. What changed in the rare moments I practiced instead of, consumed? So, my body changed, my vision landed because I took practical actions. My material reality reorganized. But those moments were islands in the ocean of consumption. The triangle offered transformation. I choose education about transformation instead. So as you get into 2029, you realize that you wasted the most significant astrological transit of your life collecting information about it, because this is the magic triangle. It's rare, it won't happen in our lifetime again. So, bypassing answers sound like I integrated the triangle's wisdom through deep spiritual study and inner work. No, the prompt asks, what did you actually do? Materially specific practices, right? How much time and consumption versus activation? Be honest in the percentages. How much was practice? How much was just consuming? What changed in your body or what didn't change in your body? What changed in your reality, your material reality, not just your understanding and thinking, thinking about, transformation versus information, the actions you take, the time you spend on consuming versus, doing right. And the final prompt is, who are you becoming as the triangle completes? Name the before and the after. Who entered this triangle in 2025, 2026 versus who is exiting in 2028. The self that entered is composting and who is emerging from the soul, right? So who you were entering the triangle, your identities, your beliefs, your systems, your routines, the relationships, your work, your values. In 2029, as who you are exiting the triangle, what died, what's emerging, coming up, what's integrated. Name the difference, the differences specifically. So if you listen to this in 2026, come back to this in 2029, the start of, or maybe the end of 2028, come back then. So name the differences specifically in your identity, your beliefs, your relationships. What terrifies you about who you're becoming? What thrills you? What's the most, disorientating change, the change you can't return from? even if you wanted to. So, the triangle is about death and rebirth at a 4-year scale. As I said, you shouldn't, emerge, come out the other end the same. This prompt forces naming who you were, not your ideal self, but who you actually were, naming who you've become, based on evidence, what's actually different in your material life now, your relationships, your values, and your actions, confronting the fear and the assignment of, the irreversible changes that this magic triangle is taking you through, and acknowledging the self that entered the triangle is compassing, letting go, let it die. So, what's the honest evaluation of who you are now and who you were when you entered this? So in 2025, you was a non-profit professional, salaried, identified with helping but not threatening systems, maybe in a monogamous partnership, an apartment renter maybe, or consumer, presenting as conscious. Spiritual practice was compartmentalized from your practical day-to-day life and reality. And in 2029, with the magic triangle ending, you quit your job, living on community land trust, maybe teaching permaculture and pleasure activism. Your relationship opened into a constellation that terrifies maybe and liberates you, growing 60% of food, no health insurance. Maybe, you took a calculated risk because you're looking after yourself more, even though in countries where you have to have health insurance, I would say you should always kind of keep it. Spiritual practice is, now your material life, there's no separation between the different, your intellectual self, your spiritual self, everything's aligned. What terrifies you now could be, economic instability, visibility, judgment from who I used to be, possibility on making a huge mistake. That's what terrifies you then or even now still, because you can still feel scared, right? Maybe what thrills you about all of these changes, is that you have freedom, personal agency, you feel more alive, you feel like your body trusts you now and you trust your body. What's been most disorientating about this change is your relationship to security. I thought security was salary, monogamy, a lease, insurance. Turns out that was dependence package as security. And as I said, not everyone needs to get rid of insurance and stuff like that. Do the changes that suits your lifestyle and circumstances, right? And remember that actual security is, the community I trust, the skills that you've built, the land I tend to, the plants you look after, whatever it is you're doing, the body that you listen to, and you probably can't go back to thinking job equals safety anymore. That identity died, and you are this person that, even though it can be scary, not having the security that you have. Or maybe in 2025 you was a corporate, had a corporate career, 6 figures, successful by every metric I inherited. Your partnership was held together by inertia and boredom and, just routine and sad mortgages and stuff like that. Your spirituality was a side interest and you believed that you needed more money to be safe. So in 2029, you still have the same job that didn't die, same partnership. That's what's dying currently, but internally you're completely different. You maybe you're dead inside at work, just haven't quit because you're scared, right? And your partnership is ending now. We both know it, never saying it, pretending the triangle didn't change us. And what terrifies me is actually leaving, being alone, starting over at 45, admitting I built life based on others' values and not mine. And what fills me is nothing yet. I'm in a death phase, haven't reached rebirth. And what's most disorientating about this change is I can't pretend anymore. I used to perform, that's fine. And I'm fine, and you believed it when you weren't. And now my body won't let me. Every day at my job, in my partnership, I feel the death. I know I need to jump and leave, but I'm not jumping yet. And, writing this, I realised I wasted the triangle's final months. I was supposed to let death finish and end, and I'm clinging to a corpse, right? And actually just being honest, 2 separate circumstances. Some people will follow it and some won't. but what I'm hoping to get across is their lesson. Even if you miss the timing, you can still make changes after, right? So, what bypassing sounds like is, I've ascended to a higher consciousness now and realize all my attachments to ego, identity were false. No, that's wrong. The prompt asks, who are you specifically? Your job, relationships, material reality, not just consciousness. Who are you now? Evidence in material life. What terrifies you? What makes you excited? Actual emotions. Not, I've transcended above emotions. Performance, what changes have you actually made? What are irreversible now? The specifics, in your body, the truth. And remember, these 5 questions are not theory, they're surgical. Answer them honestly, inviting. Don't just think about them, right? Maybe you do them all in 1 year, the ones that you can, and come back to them, review your answers quarterly across 2026 to 2028 and beyond. Track how answers change, which ones change the most, and that changes the triangle, working. And most people won't answer these questions because they're too confronting, too honest, too much work, and life is a lot of work after all. And those who do, you will have documented your own death, rebirth in real time. 2029, you'll read 2026's answers and barely, recognize who wrote them. And that's the teaching, right? To allow the magic triangle to transform you. Okay, so now I'm just going to give you the summary of all of the timelines, right? So Uranus is sextile to Neptune, has 5 exact passes. The first one was in the 29th of August 2025, then the 20th of November 2025, then the 15th of July 2026, then the 15th of November 2027, and then the 6th of June 2027, and then Uranus' trine to Pluto has 5 exact passes as well, from the 18th of July 2026, the 29th of November 2026, the 15th of June 2027, and the 13th of January 2028, and the 10th of May 2028. So these are the exact dates, right? Of course, I gave you the entering and leaving times in part 1. And then Neptune sextile to Pluto has 6 passes. The first on the 25th of July 2026, the 16th of September 2026, the 29th of June 2027, the 16th of October 2027, the 9th of June 2028, and then the 8th of November 2028, completing the magic triangle. So, in conclusion, Uranus, Neptune and Pluto are spending 4 years in perfect harmony, and the only question that matters is whether you're going to make the conscious choice to change the things in your life that needs changing, right? So, as I said, the choice is yours. Between 2025 and 2028, 3 giants, Uranus, Neptune and Pluto, are lining up in this rare, harmonious triangle in the sky, the minor grand trine. And as I said, this doesn't happen often. In fact, it's a once in a lifetime aspect, and it's called the magic triangle because of this rarity, right? And it matters because these 3 planets rule the biggest forces in human life: how we live materially on Earth, practically, how we connect spiritually, and how power and structure get organized in the world, right? So, the simple version is Uranus wants to shake up the physical world, how we use money and food, land, energy, the way we actually live day to day. Neptune wants our spiritual life to stop being a decoration and start being a direction. Pluto wants the old broken structures, systems, governments, etc. to finally fall, and the ones worth keeping and to get stronger together. They're not fighting each other, they're cooperating, and that's rare, right, in astrology with the trines and sextiles, right? And the danger is that though this energy flows so easily that you may not use it, whether you're paying attention or not. Change will happen around you either way. So as I said, the question is whether you're choosing it or just being carried away with the tides and the flow, and in the ways that most people get carried into social media without ever deciding it was a good idea. As I said in the introduction in part 1, the opportunity is specific, and practical. Do one thing, one insight a week, that becomes a real change in your life, and these small steps are built into many actions over the 3 years, many changes. The small steps go into big actions, not just journal entries, not a retreat you go on and forget, real grounded practical changes in how you eat, earn and relate and live. So the window fully opens in 2026 and deepens in 2027 and closes in 2028. So this is the moment where spiritual understanding is supposed to meet real life, not float above it, not hide inside of it, meet it. The triangle is the invitation, and as I said, what you do with it is entirely up to you. So if you listen to all 3 parts, thanks a lot. Subscribe, follow. I'm going to be doing more of these deep dives. Anyway, I'll say goodbye. I've been talking a lot. I'm Imani, your holistic astrological karmic life coach. It's been my pleasure. Take care and see you next time.